So today we will be looking at finding the percent of a number. Our previous lesson looked at estimating the percent of the number, and so today you can find the percent of a number by using equations. So we're going to be basing it off of equations and solving for a variable today. So if we take a look at our solve and share, it says Lauren bought a jacket that was on sale. She paid 40% of the original price of $75. How much did Lauren pay for the jacket? Solve this problem any way that you choose. And so this one, because I'm finding the percent of a number rather than finding the percent, I'm going to write this as an equation where I turn the percent into a decimal. And so I'm going to take that 40% and I'm going to write it as 0.40. Now, this is representing 40%, but I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take off that 0 and I'm going to represent it as 0.4. And that way I don't have to worry about doing anything with that 0. So I'm going to take 0.4 and I'm going to multiply that by 75. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 75 and I'm going to multiply that by 4. And what's nice is if I know what 75 times 4 is, great. You can go ahead and write it down. But if I don't, I'm going to go through the multiplication algorithm anyways to get that practice in. So 5 times 4 is going to be 20. So I'm going to put down the 0, the 2. Then I'm going to multiply 4 times 7, which is going to be 28 plus 2, is going to be 30. And so my answer right now is 300, but I have this one value behind the decimal. So my answer is going to be 30. So 40% of 75 is going to be equal to $30. So that's the way that I can use it solving with a decimal. So I take my percent, I turn it into a decimal, and then I multiply it by whatever that original price is going to be. And so when I come down here and I look at this, it says, when finding the percent of a number, how can you tell if your answer is reasonable? Will the answer be greater than or less than the original amount? And so we can tell that our answer is going to be reasonable by using estimation. But here's how I can tell it's going to be greater than or less than. So the answer is going to be greater than the original amount. So greater than the original amount when the percent is going to be greater than 100. So if the percent is going to be greater than 100, then my answer should be greater than the original amount. If it's going to be less than the original amount, so it's going to be less than the original amount when the percent is less than 100. So that'll be a way that I can tell kind of if my answer is going to be reasonable too without estimating, is if my percent was greater than 100, then my answer should be greater than the original amount. If my answer or my percent was less than 100, then my answer should be less than the original amount. All right, so let's move into the visual learning for today. And so the essential question that we have is, how can you calculate percents? Well, we're going to calculate percents by writing them using equations if we need to. And so on this one, I'm not using an equation. They talk about double line diagrams too, and you can use it absolutely to see it as a visual. It's going to be more of, can you read the double line diagram and then solve for it? So if we look at our problem, it says the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders at Great Oaks School are taking a field trip. Of the 575 students attending the field trip, how many are 6th graders? So my percent that I have is going to be 36%. So to solve this, look right here, this is what I'm going to do. It says I'm going to turn 36 into a decimal. So I'm going to do decimal 36%, and I'm going to take that 36% and I'm going to multiply that by 575. So I'm going to do 0 decimal 36. I'm going to multiply that by 575. And when I do that, you'll notice that you have the option for a calculator. I will let you guys use a calculator on today because I'm not assessing your fluency with the algorithm. I'm assessing, can you find the percent of a number? And so my answer here is going to be 207. And so if you look at the calculator, what you'll do is you will enter in 3600ths. I'll multiply that by 575, and then it will give me my answer. So is my answer reasonable? Well, if I look at the estimate that they did, well, 206 graders are attending. 207 is a reasonable answer. All right, take a look at the convince me. Suppose 68% of the students attending the field trip were boys. How can you use the double line shown above to help you find the number of boys and check for reasonableness? So here's my double line diagram. So if we take a look at my double line diagram, 68%, so 68% is really close to 67%. So 67% is going to be 2/3. And so I look at what the amount is going to be for 2/3. Well, 1/3 was 200. So 2/3 is going to be 400. And so my answer should be around 400. So the answer will be around 400. And now I'm going to multiply and see. So I'm going to take my 68%, write it as a decimal, and I'm going to multiply that by 575. And so I write the equation so I can see what numbers you're using. So I'm going to do 6800ths multiplied by 575. So when I plug that into the calculator, I end up with 391. So my answer would be 391 boys. My answer is reasonable because 391 is close to 400. All right, moving into our guided practice for today. Actually, I'm going to go into another examples. So if I look at this one, I can be looking at what is 4.5% of 60. And so write an equation where I can put in a variable. So if I write 4.5% as a decimal, notice that 4.5% is 0.045. And then I multiply that times 60, which equals 2.7. I don't really need the unknown part here, is what I'm looking for. I'm really looking for, can you do 0.45 times 60 and then give me my answer? The other problem that you're going to have today is really going to be where I'm now having to find a percent. So what percent of 92 is 11.5? Okay, so I'm going to write this as an equation here. So I have let P equal the percent value. Here's my original equation. P times 92 equals 11.5. My answer will end up being a decimal answer. So I'm going to solve for P. So look right here. It's 92P equals 11.5. I divide both sides by 92, and when I divide 11.5 by 92, I get 0.125, and remember, we move the decimal 2 places to the left for percent, and so I get 12.5% of 92 is 11.5. So we'll do another practice problem like that so you can see. Okay, in the expression 34% of 60, what operation does the word of mean? And so you guys remember that when we're talking about 34%, that's going to be a ratio that of means multiply. Okay, so of means multiply. Okay, and then number 2 says, how can I use a calculator to find what percent of 180 is 108? Well, I would write, or what I would do is, if I'm looking for percent, it would be 180 is going to be P, right? 180P equals 108. Then I solve for P. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 108 divided by, let me get my 180. And so when I plug 108 into the calculator and I divide that by 180, I end up with 0.6. Let me draw my little point here. And then from here, I have to take this value and I have to multiply it by 100. What's nice is, if you're using calculator, you can just multiply it by 100, or you know that I just need to move the decimal 2 places over. Oh, there we go. And now I end up with 60%. So my answer is going to be 60%. So I'm going to divide 108 divided by 180, and I get 60%, or I get 6/10, multiply that by 100, and then I get 60%. All right, so we're going to look at what this looks like with equations. If I don't use a variable, I'll show you what the equations look like. You may use a variable if you'd like, or you can just set up an expression and then give me the equation when you find your answer. Okay, so what is 26% of 50? So if I just write my multiplication work that I'm going to do here, right, because they gave me the percent, so it's going to be 0.26 times 50, and then if I plug that into my calculator, I end up with 0.26 times 50, and I end up with 13. So the value there is going to be 13. Here, what percent of 315 is 126? So it would be 315p equals 126. So in this one, when I'm finding the part, I'm going to multiply. When I'm finding the percent, I'm going to divide. So part multiply, percent divide. So I'm going to take 126 and I'm going to divide that by 315. 315 is my total, right? What percent of 315 is my total? We said of means multiply. Well, here's my multiplication equation. It's right, 315p. And then I solve it, I end up with 126, and that'll give me my percent. So when I plug 126 into the calculator, divided by 315, I end up with 0.4. And then if I take that 0.4 and with the calculator, I multiply that by 100. I don't know why I put that there. I don't need to. I end up with 40%. But I'm really hoping that you can recognize that 0.4, oh, that's 40%, and you don't need to do that extra step in the calculator. All right, so for your independent practice today, you are going to find each part or percent. So I will walk through with you here, and we'll go through and identify whether I'm going to multiply or divide, and you're going to do all of 5 through 7. So here I'm looking for a part. So if I'm looking for a part, I'm multiplying. What percent of 75 is 33? I'm looking for a percent. And remember, for a percent, we say that you divide. And then number 7, I'm looking for a percent I'm looking for a part because it says what is 2.2 or 2 and 2500% of 24. So here I would multiply. On your math practices and problem solving, I would like for you to do all of the problems. So you're going to do all except 9 and 13. So today in your math practices, you're going to do all except for 9 and 13. It's a really ugly 9. Let me clean that up a little bit. And then you guys will be working on your independent practice.